It's tough. You never want to see injuries happen, first and foremost. You hate it when it's to anyone, let alone, the third season-ending injury that we've seen this year. But like I told our team at halftime, look, yes, we've been dealt a crappy hand, but we got to play it.
Okay, this is wild. The WNBA is in a massive crisis again, but forget the usual drama about bad calls or rough plays. This time, it's something way more serious. Head coach Stephanie White just dropped a bombshell about Sophie Cunningham's season-ending injury, and the sheer devastation in White's voice tells you everything. This feels like the absolute breaking point for a league that's been consistently failing its own players.
The news is about to drop, so we're okay to talk about this, but I did tear my MCL. And if you're going to hurt your knee, that is like the best possible case. And so, this year, just as a whole, like, I think the league as a whole, but really us, we've just gone through so much adversity. And then injury wise has just been like, you can't make this shit up, to be honest. And so, during Connecticut's game on Sunday, I was just in the paint trying to be help side. And someone ran into my knee and it just snapped and knee injuries are weird to me. Like, I don't really like thinking about them, but
You hear, but I fell and pop right away. And you just know. The truth here is getting impossible to ignore. The Indiana Fever have been absolutely slammed with injuries all season. And now they've hit their breaking point. Their defensive rock, Sophie Cunningham, is officially out for the rest of 2025 with a torn MCL. Get this. She's now the fourth Indiana Fever player officially done for the entire season.
That play dirty in this league. It's absolutely ridiculous. These players are paying a price for Kathy Engelbert's incompetence. Doesn't seem like a fair trade-off, if you ask me. Sophie Cunningham will miss the remainder of the season after suffering an injury during our game at Connecticut on Sunday. In a corresponding move, we have signed guard Shea Petty to a 7-day hardship contract and released Kyra Lambert. Now, folks, Sophie Cunningham is out for the season. My question is, what kind of adjustments should the Indiana Fever make? What kind of adjustments does Stephanie White have at her disposal? What kind of adjustments is Stephanie White capable of to help this team make it to the finish line?
Sophie Cunningham's season-ending knee injury has become the ultimate last straw for Indiana Fever fans. I mean, they've watched their team get absolutely decimated by injuries this season, and it was supposed to be a championship year. So when head coach Stephanie White announced that Cunningham tore her MCL in Sunday's game against the Connecticut Sun and was done for 2025, the fan base literally exploded with frustration.
Initially, the Indiana Fever didn't even report what the knee injury was. They just said that it would be season ending. However, Alex Filippo, she reported that Sophie Cunningham did tear her MCL and that she would be out for the rest of the season, but she is expected to make a full recovery before next season. So obviously that is good news. And when you talk about tears in your knee, an MCL is one that has a quicker recovery period for the most part than something like an ACL, or sometimes even meniscus can be longer than an MCL. A patellar tendon obviously is much more severe than all of them. So it was good news relatively that it was an MCL and not anything more serious, and there wasn't.
So let that sink in. That's 4 Indiana Fever players officially gone for the season. Sophie Cunningham is out, but she's not alone. We've also got Ari McDonald with a broken bone in her foot, Sydney Coulson with a torn ACL, and then there's the massive question mark around Caitlin Clark's groin injury, which has kept her sidelined for over a month now. Seriously, what an absolute joke this league has become when a team can lose half its core rotation to injuries and the WNBA leadership just sits there in silence, giving us nothing but empty talk about day-to-day recovery timelines.
Told you guys the day of the game that she was done for the year. Now, so everybody that was jumping in my comments like, oh, you're clickbaiting, you don't know. No, I knew it was over. I knew. So now the Indiana Fever have officially come out and let it be known. This right here is by Underdog WNBA. It says Sophie Cunningham diagnosed with torn right MCL per Chloe Peterson. And this is awful news. This is just awful.
Awful. The way this injury happened was just brutal. It was during Sunday's overtime win against Connecticut when Sun guard Bria Hartley literally fell right into Cunningham's right leg while driving to the basket. Sophie immediately grabbed her knee, crumpled to the floor, and was just writhing in pain. Honestly, for Fever fans, this scene has become sickeningly familiar this season, and get this, the 29-year-old guard, who just celebrated her birthday the day before, had to be helped off the court and never came back into the game.
You had Sophie Cunningham, one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter, coming into the second half, shooting the lights out, right? Just absolutely dominating on that perimeter for the Indiana Fever and looking like a player that could actually help the Indiana Fever get far into the playoffs, be that X factor for them when the energy is down, they are getting blown out, or whatever the case may be. They can't even find a bucket. Sophie Cunningham was one of those players to actually get them going. And now all of a sudden, no Sophie Cunningham. I mean, I don't know how many more blows the Indiana Fever can actually take and survive, man. I mean, they done lost everybody.
4 players out for the season. Let that sink in for a moment. 4 Indiana Fever players are now officially done for 2025, and Caitlin Clark is still sidelined indefinitely with a groin injury that's kept her out since July 15th. This isn't just some string of bad luck. This is a systematic failure by a league that absolutely refuses to address the escalating physicality and the terrible officiating that's caused this whole injury epidemic. Cunningham's injury is especially devastating because she had become such a crucial piece for the Fever, averaging nearly 9 points and 4 rebounds, shooting a career-high almost 47% from the field and over 43% from 3. She had literally stepped into a makeshift point guard role after McDonald and Coulson went down on August 7th. Now the Fever have lost their defensive anchor and veteran leader at the absolute worst possible moment.
Good job, Bria. Now Sophie Cunningham's out for the rest of the season. Good job, Kathy Engelbert, for not checking your players, for not making sure your officials get grips on these games, for letting all types of malice behavior to take place on the court. These players feel they have the right to take cheap shots. These players feel like they have the right to dive at people's legs. And now Bria Hartley has claimed her latest victim.
The domino effect of these injuries, it cannot be overstated. With Caitlin Clark still battling her groin injury and zero clear timeline for her return, the Fever are basically running on a skeleton crew compared to their original roster. And get this, Sophie Cunningham herself revealed on her podcast that even Clark doesn't know when she'll be back, describing it as literally a day-by-day type of thing. What makes this entire situation even more infuriating is the WNBA's complete and utter inaction. They won't investigate the physicality, they won't look at the officiating, they won't even examine the players who are consistently targeting opponents with dangerous plays. Instead, they just let this systematic targeting continue while their biggest stars drop like flies.
A moment of celebration was completely overshadowed by the devastating news that the WNBA received yesterday afternoon. Sophie Cunningham, the only star remaining in this toxic turd, the only recognizable face amongst a league filled with anonymous faces. The Indiana Felines announced yesterday afternoon that Sophie Cunningham was out for the rest of the season. Translation? The WNBA season is officially over.
Look, the 2025 season has been an absolute disaster when it comes to injuries. Tracking data shows we hit 105 injuries by just June 24th, a pace that's going to absolutely shatter previous records. To put that in perspective, the entire 2024 season had 204 injuries, and 2023 saw 100. Yet, through all of this, the WNBA leadership has stayed completely silent, offering zero solutions, zero investigations, and zero accountability for this dangerous environment they've allowed to fester. Head coach Stephanie White's reaction to Cunningham's injury perfectly sums up the frustration. She said, "At the time, it's like crap. And then you go down there and see her and it's like, okay, just wanted to be able to calm down and be able to regroup, and then it turns to problem solving. How do we put ourselves in a position to win? What do we need to do?" I think that's how I survive. The fact that White has to constantly pivot into problem-solving mode just because of injuries that could have been prevented with proper officiating and league oversight, that's the real issue here.
And, you know, I'm so proud of this group. And I know at this point it sounds cliche, but they have been so resilient. They have been so connected. They have stayed together. They have found a way. And you know, because of that, it's continued to put us in position to win ball games. And we're going to continue to battle, and we're going to continue to put ourselves in position. And we know it's not an easy road. But there's no group that I'd rather go to battle with.
Okay. With Sophie Cunningham officially out for the season, the Indiana Fever's desperation for Caitlin Clark's return has hit critical levels. Clark, who's been sidelined since July 15th with that groin injury, represents the only real hope for salvaging what should have been a championship season. Without their superstar, the team's just been treading water, going an even 10-10, and watching their playoff spot slide from comfortable to a super precarious 7th place. But the numbers, man, they tell the truly brutal story of Clark's importance, not just to the Fever, but to the entire WNBA. When Clark's been out, nationally televised games have seen a catastrophic 55% drop in ratings, falling from an average of 1 point, and it gets worse. The Fever's ticket prices have crashed by 47% during her absence, with resale prices plummeting by over 6. These aren't just stats. This is the harsh reality that without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA becomes largely irrelevant to mainstream sports audiences. Clark herself has even acknowledged the physical toll this season has taken, admitting, "This is the first time I haven't felt like a young body that can run around and sprint every day." The fact that a 23-year-old athlete is already worried about her body breaking down should be a massive red flag for the league, but instead, they just keep allowing the dangerous physicality that's led to this entire injury epidemic.
The dump averaged 1.4 million viewers on ABC, up 13% over last year. Of course, the number is inflated. It's an illusion. Ratings on ABC were inflated because nearly half their games featured the Indiana Felines. There were 12 games on ABC this year. 7 of them did not feature the Felines. I would give you the average of those 7 games, but ratings are mysteriously missing for 4 of those exciting matchups. WNBA ratings are mysteriously missing for games that aired on broadcast television.
Honestly, how can the Indiana Fever possibly be expected to win under these insane circumstances? They're now staring down the league's most difficult remaining schedule, all while operating with a roster that's completely depleted after losing 4 players to season-ending injuries. They've got to navigate games against the league-leading Minnesota Lynx 3 times, plus challenging matchups against teams literally fighting for playoff positioning, and they're doing it all without their core players. The schedule breakdown shows just how brutal this path ahead is. According to Strength of Schedule rankings, Indiana faces opponents with an average winning percentage of almost .600 over their final 9 games. That's the toughest schedule left in the entire W. We're talking 3 games against the 28-5 Minnesota Lynx, who are on pace to set a new single-season wins record, plus brutal West Coast matchups against teams desperate to make the playoffs. Yet somehow, despite this level of adversity that would absolutely crush most franchises, the Indiana Fever still have an 87.1% chance of making the playoffs, according to ESPN's Basketball Power Index. That's a huge testament to the foundation they built early in the season with Clark leading the way, but it also highlights just how precarious their situation has become. They've already slipped from 6th to 7th in the standings, and now they're just half a game ahead of the 8th-seeded Seattle Storm.
If Sophie Cunningham can't come back for the rest of the season, do we even bother playing with fire and bring Caitlin Clark back? Do we even bother playing with fire, risking potential further injury in bringing Caitlin Clark back? This has been a season from hell. This has been a terrible experience as far as the 2025 WNBA season goes. Especially if you're a Caitlin Clark supporter, especially if you're an Indiana Fever fan. You see Caitlin in and out, in and out, in and out, out for the longest period of time now.
To say the Indiana Fever have faced adversity this season, that would be the understatement of the century. This has been a season where literally everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. and yet, somehow, they're still fighting for a playoff spot. That's a miracle in itself, given what they've endured. Let me break down this timeline of disasters for you. Caitlin Clark suffered her first injury back in May, missing 5 games with a quad strain. She came back briefly, only to get a groin injury in late June that kept her out for 2 weeks. Then, after returning again, she suffered another groin injury on July 15th that's kept her sidelined for over a month now, with no clear return date. Meanwhile, on August 7th, both Ari McDonald and Sydney Colson suffered season-ending injuries in the same game, McDonald with a broken foot, Colson with a torn ACL. And now, just 10 days later, Sophie Cunningham joins them on the season-ending injury list with her torn MCL. Think about that. 3 point guards lost to season-ending injuries in just 10 days. 3. And the fourth, Caitlin Clark, remains indefinitely sidelined with no timeline for return. Folks, this isn't just bad luck. This is a systematic breakdown of player safety that the WNBA just refuses to address. The fact that Indiana is still even in playoff contention after losing their entire backcourt is nothing short of miraculous. Coach Stephanie White deserves enormous credit for somehow keeping this team together, constantly adapting her rotations and game plans as key players drop like flies. The signing of veteran guard Shea Petty on a hardship contract represents their latest attempt to patch together a competitive roster, but let's be real, it's essentially putting a band-aid on a severed artery.
And now Sophie Cunningham out for the season. That's with Caitlin Clark still out and having been out for much of the season. The season was saved against the Connecticut Sun, but can it be salvaged, I guess, is the question here, because Sophie Cunningham was one of the better players for the Fever all year. She is going to be tough to replace, even if the rest of the squad can get to full strength. But as they've battled, as they've continued to fight, to me, you don't punt on the season, because you don't know how many chances you get, and you have to reward that grit. The question just goes back to, again, when is Caitlin Clark going to be back? There remains no clarity on that topic.
The Sophie Cunningham injury, and really, the whole crisis facing the Indiana Fever, exposes the fundamental problems absolutely plaguing the WNBA. Think about this. This is a league that's become so reliant on Caitlin Clark for viewership and revenue that her absence creates a mind-blowing 55% drop in ratings. Yet, they completely fail to protect her from the dangerous physicality that's kept her sidelined for most of the season. And get this, the injury crisis extends way beyond just Indiana. 5 of the 8 All-Star starters have dealt with significant injuries this season, including Clark, Aya Wilson, Satu Sabali, Ryan Howard, and Angel Reese. The league's condensed schedule and that increased physicality have literally created a perfect storm of player safety issues that the WNBA leadership just keeps ignoring. Meanwhile, the financial implications are staggering. ESPN and WNBA League Pass have seen their streaming numbers absolutely collapse without Clark, with games routinely missing projections. The Fever's home attendance has stayed strong, which is great, but road attendance for games without Clark has shown massive drop. Merchandise sales, sponsorship visibility, and the overall league buzz all have taken huge hits during her extended absence.
Man, I mean, they done lost everybody. Everybody. Oh, this sucks. This sucks, man. This hit me in the gut when I saw this. And it's like, you don't want to actually bring Caitlin Clark back as soon as possible, right? You don't necessarily want to do that, but they might have to. They might have to, man. Now, with Sophie, I was like, maybe she could sit out for a little bit. Maybe they could still survive what's coming up. I know a lot of people were like, well, they're running into the Lynx, and, this schedule is tough. I get all that, but even in this first game, the Lynx have a back-to-back. So they're going to be playing a back-to-back Lynx in the first game. They could possibly pull that off.
Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire injury crisis is watching a legitimate championship window just completely slip away, all due to circumstances totally beyond the team's control. The Indiana Fever came into this season with real title aspirations. They'd built a roster around Caitlin Clark that genuinely looked like it could compete with anyone in the league. They even started strong, winning early games and establishing themselves as a force in the Eastern Conference. But then, injuries just systematically dismantled those championship dreams. With 4 players now out for the season and Clark's return still up in the air, the Fever are staring at the harsh reality that their best shot at a title might be disappearing because of factors that proper league oversight could have easily prevented. Here's the cruel irony. If Clark does somehow return healthy for the playoffs, the Fever could still make a run. They have the talent, the coaching, and the motivation to compete at the highest level. But every single day that passes without her return makes that scenario less and less likely. And every additional injury just makes their path exponentially more difficult.